You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm Cody Roark, host of the show, joined alongside by Sayre Bedinger. Both of us are Broncos analysts for the Locked On Network and 9 News. You can follow me on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL. Follow Sayre at Sayre Bedinger. But we got some Broncos news and notes today, some insight heading into Saturday's matchup with the Seattle Seahawks as to how long the starters may play. Not to mention, we go through our Broncos with the most to gain and most to lose. Sayre, good to be joined by you again, my friend.
I love it. I love it, Cody. And we got bright, sunny skies here in Omaha, Nebraska. Sounds like you, not so much, huh?
No, so if you hear anything Broncos country in this recording, we have this massive thunderstorm and monsoon that's coming down sideways. So bear with us. So hopefully my mic does a great job of cleaning that up here. But Sayre, look, the Broncos, they wrapped up practice here on Thursday, and it was a walkthrough pace. And, you know, there was a media session afterwards with head coach Vic Fangio, offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur, defense coordinator Ed Donatell, various players. But the narrative continues where we see a million media reporters asking Broncos coaches the same question about the quarterback competition in different ways that they've already provided an answer for on the previous question. And I just think that the trend has just gotten so ridiculous. We're going to see here, I think, after this week, where the Broncos go with the quarterback competition. Both QBs in practice, they got even reps, split even. Our good friend Andrew Mason said, hey, I logged it, dead even as well. So, I mean, let's be real here. This is getting ridiculous.
It is. It is getting a little bit ridiculous. It's kind of like, you know, when it's really close to Christmas and your kids, like, they want to open the gifts so bad, and you're just like, just wait like 3 or 4 more days. Like, Christmas is almost here. You'll get to open the presents. You'll get to find out soon enough. That's kind of what it's like at this point. It's like, okay, by Sunday or Monday, we're going to know who's going to be starting week 1 for the Denver Broncos. And I think that at this point, you know, you don't need to be asking Von Miller. You don't need to be asking Cortland Sutton. You don't even need to be asking Pat Shurmur or Vic Fangio. They don't want to say right now. So there's no need to do it before they want to say it. And just to keep asking, you know, we're getting the same answers. And frankly, it feels like it's kind of making them a little bit annoyed, a little bit perturbed. Like, I know they get it. They get that it's the media's job to ask questions. But, man, let's get a little creative with these questions here, huh?
I mean, like, for example, how is Demaria Crockett looking, for example, with the injuries to Mike Boone, Levante Bellamy? How has he stepped up this week in practice? That's a question I'd ask off the top there if I was there in person. But, you know, it is what it is. And I like that Pat Shurmur actually kind of fired back and said, hey, I'm not giving you a headline. I love that. That's the thing I like about that. It's about time because, look, coaches are tired of it. They were focused on 90 players. Well, not 90, 85 now. But they're focused on all those players, as are we. I feel like that's something we do really well over here, Lockdown Broncos, not just focusing on quarterback. But let's get into some practice notes from Thursday. Broncos head coach Vic Fangio had mentioned Baron Browning, who's made his return to practice week. He could play on Saturday against the Seahawks. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, Sayre, but, you know, like I said, limited action. He has had a good week of practice, according to both Vic and Ed Donatell. What do you think about this?
I think it'd be a lot of fun to see him play. I thought Von Miller made an interesting point in his press conference. You know, he talked about not wanting his first game back to be on turf. And so I don't know, maybe you take that similar approach with Baron Browning there coming back, but at the same time, he's a rookie. He's really cutting his teeth. He's got to get out there and play and make his presence felt. And the fact that Fangio said he had a good week of practice after the last thing that we heard from him being he's really just so far behind, I think it's exciting. It's encouraging. And I would love to see, I don't know if the Broncos would want to tip much of this off, but I would love to see a little bit of that versatility that we've kind of been dreaming about for Baron Browning. You know, obviously he came in as an off-ball linebacker, but I think when you evaluate him in terms of the NFL draft and watching him at Ohio State coming out, his pass rush ability is really what set him apart for me as, okay, you know, if the Broncos are considering Micah Parsons in round 1, maybe you pass on Parsons, go a different direction, and take Baron Browning in round 2. Well, they got him at pick 105. So I think that'd be really fascinating to see what he can do in terms of his pass rush ability and versatility.
I'd be excited to see what he can do as well. Just a combination of he and Justin Sternad. I mean, the Broncos right now, I think they have a good problem, as we've talked about. They have depth. They have options to evaluate these guys. Now, another evaluation that is currently ongoing is the right tackle competition. And I know you and I had talked about it. We felt like based on the writing on the wall, seeing the reps divvied out against the Vikings, we felt like, hey, maybe Bobby Massey's probably the in-house favorite right now. But Broncos head coach Vic Fangio said that the competition, it's close, and that both players, both Calvin and Bobby Massey, will play at right tackle on Saturday against a Seattle Seahawks team where the Broncos will face their starters.
And I like that. I like that they still have it close right now. That gives confidence that, you could still see Calvin Anderson come and swing back around and take that from Bobby Massey. Not that it wouldn't be nice to see Massey play. I know that he's played well in the past with the Chicago Bears, even at a Pro Bowl level. So for Anderson to come in and be able to really take that job, and I mean, that would speak volumes to the work that he's put in. I know we've seen and heard a lot about the things that he's been doing with Garrett Bowles over the course of the offseason. So it would be a lot of fun. I think that you're always wanting and preferring the long-term option. It's never great to go into a season knowing that, okay, after this year, we're going to have to replace this starter on our offensive line, or we're going to have to replace this starter anywhere on the team. So having that ability to go into the season and say, hey, this might be locked down for the foreseeable future, or at least a couple years, I think would be really nice. So I'm glad that it's still close going into this Seattle game.
Hey, you don't want to make any abrupt decisions too quickly. You do have the potential for Calvin Anderson maybe to be a long-term in-house guy versus Bobby Massey, who's really just a one-year rental. But with that upside that he has, that experience, you always have to factor that in. But I am intrigued. It goes back to that comment you made about what Von Miller said about he doesn't want to play on his first game back on turf. Well, if he plays week 1 against the Giants, it's on turf. So I understand the mental barrier right there for him. And Vic said, hey, look, we could see Von. If the Broncos want him to play, he did say that he would play. So you have to factor that in between he and Bradley Chubb. According to Broncos head coach Vic Fangio, they could play 12 to 15 total defensive snaps this week in terms of the starters on the defensive side of the ball. Pat Surtain could play, but they may err on the side of caution with him. He returned to practice, walkthrough pace on Thursday at the UCL Training Center. So a lot of storylines we're going to be following here on Locked On Broncos, and we're going to have you covered as well on Saturday with the post-game report. All the information you need to know about the Broncos game, instant recap. Sayre and I have you covered. But with that said, Broncos country, coming up here in just a moment, looking ahead of the Seahawks matchup, which players have the most to gain this week for the Broncos against the Seattle Seahawks specifically? Sayre and I, we break that down for you. But before we get into that conversation, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there at Built Bar. And Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the market today. My good friend Sayre, he just placed an order for 3 boxes of peanut butter brownie, salted caramel, and even that grasshopper cookie, that thin mint combination with fudge. He placed an order. I can't wait to hear what he has to say, but I can tell you this. Built Bar is my favorite protein bar on the market. It's healthy. It tastes exactly like a candy bar because the bars are made of 100% chocolate. They're soft and easy to chew. Not to mention they are also healthy for you. They contain 70 grams of protein, only 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. It is fantastic, Sayre, and I can't wait for you to have that box of Built Bar. But I want you to get your hands on a box of Built Bar today, Broncos country, by going to Built.com. Using promo code LOCK15, that's going to get you 15% off your next order. Once again, promo code LOCK15 is going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. Get the Kareem Jackson hard-hitting protein bar of all protein bars today. As we preview the Seattle Seahawks game this upcoming Saturday, Sayre, 8 o'clock p.m., Mountain Time kickoff. We have a good friend overseas in Ireland and in the UK who says that the game will kick off at 3 a.m. his time. So obviously, we want to get that coffee ready for you. I've got a pot of coffee that I'm going to have brewed just for that game specifically. It's going to be a little bit of a late night for both Sayre and I in Broncos country, so we're going to have you covered here on the podcast. Just a reminder, this is a podcast, Locked On Broncos. You can get it every single podcasting platform on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or the Odyssey app, not to mention here on YouTube in video format. So tell your friends and family that are Broncos fans to check this out to make sure that they're locked in to the Locked On Broncos podcast. But Sayre, obviously a lot of storylines with starters for most teams around the NFL playing this upcoming weekend, and I feel like this is always great to dive into. Broncos with the most to gain this week against the Seahawks. There's various players. Who's your first player you want to talk about?
Well, Cody, you talked about earlier in the show, we really like to cover players 1 through 90. Well, in this case, 1 through 85, I think you have to consider the most recently acquired player number 85, Adrian Killens, the small running back, wide receiver out of UCF who can return kicks, can return punts. I think there's nobody with more to gain than Adrian Killens in this game. First of all, you come into the team, you're a brand new guy playing with house money. You just got your jersey. You're going to go out and step onto the playing field, and you've got an opportunity right there. Levante Bellamy injured, Mike Boone injured, Royce Freeman on the trade block, Demarie Crockett. He's done some things, but is he necessarily solidified for a roster spot? I would say not. So I think if you're Adrian Killens, you have an opportunity to go in there and show, hey, I can contribute on special teams. I can be a receiver out of the backfield. I have unique speed that you need in this backfield. I think he has so much to gain in this game, and I'm fascinated to see him play because I remember watching him coming out of UCF a little bit going into that draft, kind of looking at late round running back sleepers. And he's a guy that really intrigued the Philadelphia Eagles. The best way to find out about an unsung player on your roster, search their name on Twitter and see what fans of the team they just got cut by are saying about the roster move. And I think that a lot of Philadelphia Eagle fans are wishing that they'd given a little bit more of an opportunity to Adrian Killens. So that's definitely a guy that I think has a lot to gain in this game.
I like it. Well, Vic Fangio even says, hey, he's quick as a hiccup. He said, be careful. He's quick as a hiccup. I love that quote there. And we know Fangio doesn't throw too much praise out to players ever so often. So that's something I think that the Broncos really want to get involved with, is his speed, maybe as a return option. It depends on how they want to play Trinity Benson, guys like Deontay Spencer. But I'm going to go with the right tackles here. I think that both Calvin Anderson and Bobby Massey, Sayre, I think they have the most to gain this week because they will be going against starters. You're going to see a more legitimate sample size. How much will we see of Jamal Adams, though, who just signed a brand new contract? I don't know if we're going to see too much of him, but the Seahawks defense last year was brutal, Sayre. It was one of the worst in the NFL alongside with the Dallas Cowboys. So we'll see how that goes. But I think for either of them, this is the moment that you want to see how you gel with the first team unit against a first team defense. They're my selection here.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I think that you're absolutely right. And we touched on it in the first segment as well. You know, the fact that it's still a close competition is huge. So I love that. I love that pick. And I think too, on the defensive side of the ball, there's no competition at the starting safety positions. We know Kareem Jackson, we know Justin Simmons. So I'm really looking to see something out of Jamar Johnson. We didn't see a ton in the first game. I think you could honestly say kind of the stars on defense for that first preseason game were PJ Locke and Caden Stearns. Yeah. So I think Jamar Johnson has a huge opportunity with Trey Marshall injured. You've got a huge opportunity to go in there and solidify that the team is going to keep 5 safeties going into the season, because I know after this season, you know, Kareem Jackson, who has any idea what's going to happen with him? We know Justin Simmons is going to be there. So they're looking for that guy that's going to be behind him. And they're also, I think they've got to keep one eye on the future for depth at the position. So Jamar Johnson, with his ball skills, with his ability to play in the box, play the deep half of the field, play that too high shell, I'm excited to see more snaps from him. I want to see him go out there and attack the Seahawks. We don't know if Russell Wilson's going to play. It sounds like Geno Smith is in concussion protocol. So go out there, Jamar Johnson, and pick on those backup QBs, the 3rd and 4th QBs on the Seahawks roster, and make a couple plays on the ball.
I think that'll be big for Jamar, because really we didn't see too much of him really last week, which was kind of disappointing. And if the expectation is that, you know, starters are going to get a little bit of playing time, I imagine that PJ Locke, Caden Stearns will probably get a majority of the second and third quarter. So if you can come in as Jamar Johnson in, let's say, the midway through the third quarter, or even the fourth quarter, you still need to make a play, right? Even though you're not going to be playing against the 1s or the 2s, you're going to be playing against the 3rd or the 4th string guys. Showcase that you can pick up the little nuances of the defense and carry it over. I think that's a great key there for Jamar Johnson. I like that selection, Sayre. My next guy that I'm going to say has the most to gain, even more, these next 2 players, actually, offense and defense. Justin Sternad on defense and Trinity Benson here in week 2 of the NFL preseason. The reason I say those 2 names, because we talked about them last week. Justin Sternad has a very impressive small sample size based on last week's game. Can he build on that? Can he improve on reaction time quicker on some play action stuff? He was really slow at a couple of those things, but he made a great recovery on a couple of those plays, and he demonstrated the most upside from what we saw on the field there. I like to see him. He has the most to gain because he could show the Broncos, hey, you know, I can do this. I can do exactly what you want me to do, and I can do it from week 1. So that's something to keep an eye on. But Trinity Benson, he has a chance to further solidify himself. We said it last week, Sayre. I believe that Trinity Benson has already made the roster based on his practices, and not to mention what we saw in first game action. If he comes out this week and has a big game, even has a touchdown catch, or even let's say he has a 40-yard catch downfield, he has locked up his roster spot, in my opinion, as either that 5th wide receiver, opening up the door for some competition at that 6th spot. But I don't think that anyone's going to be really challenging him for that. So he has a chance to really separate himself this week. Any final players that you have that you're looking forward to seeing that maybe have the most to gain?
I'm looking forward to seeing Kerry Vincent Jr., another rookie. I just mentioned DeMar Johnson. I think that Kerry Vincent Jr., he got a little bit of a shout out from Vic Fangio this week, who kind of gave him like he's done some really good stuff and then he's done some not so good stuff, but they gave him a shout out nonetheless. And so I think, as we kind of talked about, and I've written about this as well, it seems like Nate Hairston may be currently in the lead for that 6th cornerback spot behind the solidified top 4. And then Michael Ojemudia, who I think, kind of came into this offseason maybe teetering on the edge of owning that spot or not. I think he's solidified himself at that 5th spot. So the 6th spot is up for grabs. And I think if you're Kerry Vincent Jr., here's your opportunity. Come in, play well, make some plays on the ball. Again, same as DeMar Johnson, make some plays on the ball. We saw him get around the ball at least once against the Vikings. I'd like to see it a few more times, especially playing out of that nickel spot. I think that's the spot where really he's going to be able to solidify himself, just like he did at LSU, as a factor on this Denver Broncos team. And so we know that if the Broncos are keeping 6, maybe even 7 corners, those guys are going to have to contribute, not just on special teams, but Kerry Vincent would be a guy that would have to come in and hey, in case of injury, you got to play the nickel. So I think that he's a guy that has a lot to gain in this game as far as making waves towards that roster.
I agree with that. I think it would be very fun to watch. You know me, sir. I'm a DB guy. I love watching all these cornerbacks play. Savion Smith is also another guy who's been getting some run. You go back down through the roster, I think that when it comes to regular season, Denver's going to keep at least 11 to 12 total DBs. Could be 6 total corners. Could be 4 or 5 safeties. I mean, it really could fluctuate there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out against the Seattle Seahawks this week. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I, we're going to talk about the players that we believe might have the most to lose this week against the Seattle Seahawks. But before we do that, let me tell you about the other sponsor of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there, betonline.ag. And it's that time of year again. And all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start football season. As always, BetOnline is your #1 spot for all the pro and college football action this season. You get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including the $500,000 NFL Mega Contest and the $200,000 NFL Survivor Contest, open now at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. Yes, 100%, folks. Be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo, meaning make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action, from football, basketball, boxing, right to horse racing. Don't wait and take advantage of all the great offers available for the 2021 NFL season. You can do that using promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Sayre, as we jump into the fourth quarter action of today's episode, Locked On Broncos, in your favorite audio podcasting platform in video format here on YouTube. Let's talk about the players that have the most to lose this upcoming week against the Seattle Seahawks, because I believe in this time of the year, you look at all the roster changes that have to happen after game 1 to game 2, after game 2 to game 3, and after game 3. It's a lot. It's significant. Teams have some tough decisions that they have to make, and bad performances or not meeting expectations, I think, can lead to you having the most to lose. Now, for you, who is a player that you believe might have the most to lose this week against the Seahawks?
Well, I think you got to look first and foremost at the quarterback position. It's either Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. If the competition is truly as close as Vic Fangio says that it is, and I tend to believe that it's leaning Drew Lock's way, but if it's as close as Vic Fangio says that it is, I think that a lot is riding on this game. So if you're Drew Lock, man, you can't go out there and throw, I don't even know if you can throw a pick. I certainly know you can't throw 2 picks. If you're Teddy Bridgewater, you've got to go out there and you've got to continue to move the offense. Do what you do best. Take what the defense gives you. I think that's kind of become his MO, even though we've seen throughout training camp and even last year with the Carolina Panthers that Bridgewater is not necessarily some magician when it comes to avoiding interceptions. I think that's kind of a misconception that people have about him, is that he's just able to go out there and not turn the ball over whatsoever. So Drew Lock just did it at such a high rate last year. So I think that if you're Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, man, there's a lot riding on this game. And one of those guys has a lot to lose, meaning the starting position.
I think that you make some interesting points there too, because like you said, coming into it at least, right? If we base the Seahawks defense off of last year, I mean, the expectation is the Broncos should light them up, right? But then it changes every year. Personnel, guys coming back from injury. So we never want to make these assumptions here, but the Broncos have to do that. Teddy Bridgewater has to do that. And going back to what Tim Jenkins said, that he grades quarterbacks on what NFL coaches grade QBs on. Can Teddy improve in those areas where he went? I believe it was 6 of 9 versus Drew, who went 8 of 8 in the grading period. So we have to see these things. We have to see this gradual, improvement. But also, I think for Drew, can we see a consistent performance? Can he stack on last week's, and can he do the same exact thing this week or even build on that? That's going to be key, because that's really been the biggest question with Drew is, can he be consistent? I don't think that, there's any argument to that. I think that's exactly where he needs to be. One player I'm going to mention here is Alexander Johnson at inside linebacker. And look, we haven't heard too much about his name being called in training camp or even in the preseason. Didn't get to see him last week against the Minnesota Vikings, where you and I both argued, hey, maybe we should have saw him a little bit because he is technically on a one-year deal. But with the emergence of Justin Sternad, Baron Browning being able to play, look, if one of these guys comes in, I don't think Josie's going to play. I mean, he might. He returned to practice this week, so we may see him. But if we see these other linebackers perform really well, I mean, I feel like it does put a little bit of pressure on Alexander Johnson, who, look, by the way, I love Alexander Johnson as a football player. I think he's very instinctual. He's got a lot of talent to him. There's areas of his game that need refinement. That you can say the same thing for every player. But having these young guys that might be long-term options and might be more cost-friendly after this year, I think it makes sense to put a little bit of pressure on Alexander Johnson.
I think it does too. And I think that it's obvious at this point, Coach Fangio trusts Josie Jewell to call the defense. You really know what you're getting from Josie Jewell. You're getting an assignment sound, technique sound linebacker who's really smart, is able to play a lot faster than he, actually flies around the field, just because he knows what he's seeing. He understands what offenses are doing. He knows how to be in the right place at the right time. With Alexander Johnson, you almost wonder if you've seen him reach almost his ceiling, so to speak, as far as he does play instinctual, but at the same time, Cody, and this being a defensive player yourself, a lot of times defensive players that play based off instinct are not always in the right place at the right time. And that we've seen that happen with Alexander Johnson a number of occasions, especially last year, as he took a little bit of a dip in coverage, and in terms of his coverage statistics and abilities that we saw in 2019, where, man, he was looking rock solid in that regard. It was just this freak of nature at 55 pounds or whatever he is, 6'3", out there making plays in coverage against, I remember the Chargers game, he had that interception. He just looked really good in 2019, but it wasn't the same in 2020. And so we're talking about the option of Justin Sternad starting. And like you said, Sternad has a lot to gain from this game, and I think it's going to be at the expense of Alexander Johnson. I view Josie Jewell as a guy that has more of the long-term future with the Denver Broncos, because he's not going to go out there and break the bank. He's younger than Alexander Johnson. He's the guy who calls the plays in the defense. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe he's the guy who calls the plays on the defense. So in that case, you're talking about a guy who's got way more responsibility on his shoulders in Jewell, and then a guy who can go out there and kind of play a little bit more free in Justin Sternad. I think that the Broncos really like that option. I get that vibe. I don't know that they've actually said that, but I just kind of get that vibe based on the fact, hey, we're going to audition Sternad and Josh Watson in game one, and Alexander Johnson's not even going to play. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's, either cut or traded. But I think that things are kind of trending that way. I mean, I just get that impression.
I mean, it's really hard to ignore based on the Broncos' moves, right? Going out in the draft and getting an inside linebacker and Baron Browning, a guy who can do that, and even playing a little bit of Jonathan Cooper inside backer to start last week. I mean, that's what we saw. Denver has all these different personnel options that Vic wants his guys that are playing inside. He wants them to be able to play outside as well. He wants defensive ends to be able to play D tackle. I mean, that's really his philosophy. If you play corner, you got to learn how to play the nickel. If you play the nickel, you have to learn how to play safety. I mean, it's multifaceted, and we're starting to see the NFL expand to that realm on the defensive side of the ball, which, look, I love it. I love being, not just a one-trick pony. That's one thing I think that sets the Broncos apart, several players, is that they can do multiple positions, which I think in the long run, I think generates more opportunities for success as a unit and potentially as a team. So I do agree with you there, Sayre. In Broncos country, we want to know who you think has the most to prove or has the most to lose this upcoming week for the Broncos, specifically against the Seattle Seahawks. Is the tight end 3 position. Eric Saubert, Sayre and I both feel has really solidified himself as being in place as that guy. Can Austin Forrest, Sean Byer, or Andrew Beck step up to the table a little bit and maybe increase that or challenge Eric Saubert, who's seemingly getting a majority of those reps? That's a storyline we're also going to be following here on Locked On Broncos. But with that said, Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the show. Just a reminder, if you love the show, if you haven't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and follow us on your favorite audio podcasting platform for daily exclusive Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage every day all year long, covering the team that you root for on Sundays, all things orange blue. Here, you get it from Sayre, you get it from myself. With us at Broncos Country, we'll see you again for another episode. Lockdown Broncos, the post-game report against the Seattle Seahawks.